Howdy, friends. Welcome to another episode of Joel MP Talks NFL, and on today's episode, we're going to look forward to Week 10 top fantasy football quarterback, tight end, defensive streamers. We're going to look at Week 10 top bets of the week. We're going to look at must-watch games for Week 10, but I want to start today's episode by talking about Gardner Minshew. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars are going into their bye week here in Week 10, and by Week 11, it's expected that Nick Foles is going to be ready to play. So a lot of people are speculating that Nick Foles should be the new starting quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I don't think you can take the job away from Gardner Minshew. I know he's been a little bit, his skill set might be a little blown out of proportion because of just the folk hero that he became instantaneously with, his naked stretching and, hammering his hand and drinking out of a Jack Daniels bottle, straight out of the bottle. All the great fun stuff that we love and meme culture loves about Gardner Minshew has blown him into being this folk hero. But outside of being a folk hero, he's also an incredible quarterback. As a sixth-round player, he's been doing phenomenal. A sixth-round rookie draft pick. He wasn't expected to start. He was thrust into a bad situation. In 8 starts this year, he's got 13 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. He's the 7th best interception rate in the entire NFL. A percentage of throws that turn into interceptions. He's the 7th best in the NFL. He's got 12 first downs rushing this year. He's averaging 26 rushing yards per game. He gives you that edge to win. Those rushing first downs from a quarterback, that's such a huge statistic because that's a hard statistic, and it's also a brain statistic because it's hard. You're willing to put your body on the line, go out there and run for it, but it's also your brain. You realize in a third down situation where the defense is going to be playing a pass defense, and you recognize that, and you see your opening, and you just go out there and get it done yourself. And that's Gardner Minshew. Whoops. He's a guy who goes out there and gets it done on his own. And I'm not saying on his own as in he does everything by himself, but he's a good team guy that, is willing to try to put the team on his back, but then also doesn't mind being a game manager and a humble fellow. And my big thing is, if you right now, long term, were trying to build a franchise and you were trying to, develop a franchise, which quarterback would you rather have? Gardner Minshew or Nick Foles? I don't know about you, but I'm taking Gardner Minshew 10 times out of 10. I think everybody basically would agree with that. But it's this issue of a sunken cost fallacy that makes the Jaguars and a lot of people think that Nick Foles should be the starter at this point. It's like, oh, well, we have too much money invested in Nick Foles, so he should be the starter. Well, that's ridiculous. The Jaguars are in a position right now where they can build for the future and play for now at the same time if they keep Gardner Minshew in at quarterback. And this idea of a sunken cost fallacy, if you don't know about what a sunken cost fallacy is, it's when you've invested so much into something that you feel like you just have to honor that investment no matter how many red flags might be surrounding said investment. An example of that is like being pot committed in a poker hand. You may not like your hand so much, but you've bet so much into the center that when somebody goes all in, you feel like you have to call them because you've invested so much into the pot already. That's a sunken cost fallacy. That can lose you the game, right? Which is where the Jaguars are at if they start Nick Foles. Gardner Minshew gives their team energy, he gives it personality, and he gives it the best chance to win, in my opinion, in the short and in the long term. I think it would be an utter mistake. It would be an atrocious mistake to start Nick Foles. And if you do, you're just delaying the inevitable. Gardner Minshew is clearly the quarterback of the future with this team. he's not losing confidence right now. He's not getting beaten badly right now. Like sure he did just have a loss, but he's only had 2 bad losses in 8 starts in the NFL so far this season. He's looked damn good in the other 6 games. Whether they won or lost those games, which he's like 4-2 in those other 6 games. So he can win games. He gives you a chance to win short and long term. I think that you got to roll with Minshew for now. It would be a mistake and short-sighted to put Nick Foles back in there, and it would be stupid. It's a sunken cost fallacy. You've convinced yourself that you've spent so much money on this guy that you have to roll him out there, And it sucks to spend money on somebody and not get elite play out of them, but it happens. You lick your wounds, and you accept happily that you have a 6th round, extremely low salary quarterback that can be your quarterback for the next several years at an extremely low cost. You still have most of your defense intact in Jacksonville. They still have Leonard Fournette. They could be a real force in the AFC here, potentially this year, but certainly for the next couple of years with Minshew at quarterback. So why not get him the experience now? It's not like he's taking bad beatings and getting his ego bruised or his physical body beaten up. So I feel like it would be a travesty to roll Nick Foles out there. That's my 2 cents on it. All right, now looking at my must-watch games for Week 10 in the NFL, my number 1 must-watch game, Monday Night Football, prime time, baby. It's the Seahawks and the Niners. Seahawks at the Niners, I should even say. And it's the Niners' biggest test of the season, for sure. And this is going to be a great rivalry this year. They get to play each other twice, and this is the first of 2 matchups. And yeah, thank God it's in prime time, so everybody gets to watch it. We're not cursed with a terrible primetime Monday night game like we are tonight with the Giants and the Cowboys. I'm recording it before the game, so maybe the game turns out well, but I'm predicting it won't. And even though it's the biggest test of the year for the Niners so far, the undefeated San Francisco 49ers, put some respect on it, they're still 6-point favorites, despite that this is probably the toughest matchup of the year for them. So that tells you how damn good the Niners are. But despite them being 6-point favorites and having home field advantage in prime time and everything, I think the Niners are for sure going to win. Russell Wilson's playing MVP football this year, and he finds a way to get his team into the game, even though they really don't have that good of a team this year. Their defense isn't very good. I think they're 5th worst in points allowed this season. So they let in a ton of points. The defense isn't very good. They don't have a ton of playmakers. He's got Tyler Lockett looking like a Pro Bowl player. No beef to Tyler Lockett, but I don't think he's that good of a player if he's not playing with Russell Wilson or, like Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback. And then, yeah, it's going to be a great game. I'm looking forward to it. I think that Russell Wilson finds a way to keep his team competitive in this one, and the Niners are must-watch football this season. And my second must-watch game for Week 10 in the NFL is, thank God, another primetime game, Sunday Night Football. It's going to be a good one. It's not the Cowboys versus the Giants of Monday Night Football. It's the Vikings versus the Cowboys. The Cowboys should be a playoff team this year. They're competing for that divisional lead. The Eagles are fighting to keep pace with them, and the Vikings are fighting to keep pace with the Packers. They're just behind them, but it looks like both these teams are playoff bound. Like, even if the Vikings can't make the playoffs via winning the division, it looks like they're in a solid place to win the wild card. So this is 2 really quality NFC playoff teams. And they're really both well-rounded teams. They have offensive pieces. They have defensive pieces. Great running backs, 2 of the best running backs in the game, Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott going head-to-head. But we also get Kirk Cousins in prime time. This is, Kirk Cousins' chance to put the myth behind him that he's terrible in prime time. It's not really a myth. It's pretty accurate, right? So this is his chance to try to win a big primetime game. It's going to be really important for both teams to win here. So there's going to be a lot of additional pressure on both these guys. Not like Dak has been a picture of composure in high pressure situations either. But I think this is just 2 evenly matched teams, both highly likely going to be playoff bound NFC teams, and this is a chance for them to go head to head in prime time. It's going to be a great game. Looking at top bets of the week for week 10, there is one bet that immediately jumped off the screen at me. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing when I saw it. I wanted to just put my freaking house payment down, my rent down on this bet. Buffalo +2 at Cleveland. Buffalo's an underdog against the Browns. The Browns have been atrocious. They just lost to the Broncos yesterday. The Bills are one of the best teams in the AFC. The Browns are one of, for sure, the bottom 6 or so teams in the AFC. I don't have the list in front of me. They're one of the worst teams in the AFC. The only teams I'm going to favor the Browns against in the AFC are like the Jets, the Dolphins, the Bengals. That's it. They just lost to the Broncos, for God's sakes, with Brandon Allen, another Allen quarterback, and just beat them. The third best Allen quarterback in the NFL just beat them. Like, how the heck is Buffalo an underdog? I'm not even going to break down anything about this. Just go ahead and place whatever bet you would like. It's free money on Buffalo this week. Buffalo +2 at Cleveland. My number 2 bet of the week for week 10 in the NFL is the over on 45.5 points, Seattle at San Francisco, Monday Night Football. Now, you might look at that game and think, oh, this is going to be a defensive game. What are you saying? San Fran's elite. Seattle's got that, the Legion of Boom. Well, you'd be about 5 years late on the Legion of Boom. Seattle gives up the 5th most points of any NFL team this year. The 5th most surrendered in the NFL this year is the Seattle Seahawks defense. So it is not the same defense that they used to be. And you might think, well, San Fran's not that dynamic of an offense. Well, San Fran put up 31 versus the Bucks, 41 versus the Bengals, 31 versus the Browns, and 51 versus the Panthers. The Seattle D is, worse than most of those defenses. Maybe a little bit better than the Bucks, but the other defenses are all better than Seattle in terms of amount of points allowed this season. So the Seahawks D is not elite anymore. The San Fran's offense has put up big points. And then, so you might think, well, sure, San Fran's offense can put up points, but then San Fran's defense is so good that Seattle's not going to be able to put up points. Well, Russell Wilson's playing MVP football this year. Like, he is just, he's God tier. He is on another level. He's otherworldly level of football player this year. Like him, Deshaun Watson, those guys are just on another level where their team is gonna be competitive, I believe, in the game. Especially the Seahawks, they're gonna be competitive. Russell Wilson is going to make it competitive, a competitive score line towards the end. I'm not saying that it's gonna be, a 3-point game or a 4-point game guaranteed or anything. I think San Fran might cover the 6-point spread, but it's going to be it's going to be 10 points at a maximum. It might be 30-20 for San Fran at a maximum, but I see San Fran putting up, high 20s, low 30s at least, points wise in this game. And then I see Seattle being within 10 points for sure of San Fran, at worst within 10 points. And this game has a competitive complexion throughout it because Russell Wilson gives you that hope of victory, right? So I'm predicting at least, a 50-point total on this game, so 45.5 points. It seems like a steal to me. It's Monday Night Football. Like I said, San Fran's going to score. Seattle is going to do their damnedest to keep up. MVP Russell Wilson's going to do a good job of that. It's Monday Night Football, so they have an extra day to prepare for each other. They have familiarity because they're divisional opponents. I think that this is going to be actually a pretty high-scoring affair, but it's being billed by the odds makers as a low-scoring affair, so that's why it's my number 2 bet of the week. My number 3 bet of the week is a bit of a sneakier bet. I think that this is just one that just appeals to me. It's the Raiders +1 versus the Chargers on Thursday Night Football. And I just think the Raiders are actually sneakily a pretty damn good football team. Like, they're not bad. They can do a lot of things offensively. They can do a lot of things defensively. Derek Carr's very competent. Josh Jacobs, one of the best rookie offensive players this year. And then the Chargers, they're only favored because they just beat the Packers. And, man, they just smacked the Green Bay Packers, who are a really good football team. Sure, you can't deny that, and that is legit as hell. But that's why they're favorites here. If we can take I'm not saying the Packers game was a total fluke, because the Chargers obviously, have some skill on the team, but they're still banged up. They're not super healthy. They're not that good of a football team, right? Overall, if you look at the whole season, they've been kind of an atrocious football team, right? They've been pretty terrible throughout this year. But so I think last week might have been a bit of a fluke. I'm willing to bet on it, is what I'm saying, basically, because the Raiders have been sneakily good all year. Think about it. They've beaten the Broncos. They beat the Bears. They beat the Colts, who are a really good football team. They beat the Lions, who are a quality football team this past week. They went right to the brink of victory with the Texans and lost narrowly. Those are all better football teams than the Chargers, in my opinion. Broncos and Bears are, maybe debatable right now, but I would say that overall in 2019, they're better teams. So basically, the Chargers are favorites because they just beat the Packers. I'm willing to bet that win was a fluke. So I'm willing to bet on the Raiders as underdogs here. I like them straight up money line or the +1. Either way, I like the Raiders here on Thursday Night Football. All right, guys, now let's get into some fantasy football talk. Streamers for Week 10. We're going to start at the quarterback position, and we're going to start at Brian Hoyer, Indianapolis Colts quarterback, who is taking on the Miami Dolphins, who are obviously very, very bad at football. They give up over 25 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. It's the 5th worst in the league. So Hoyer is basically a speculative ad that I don't know exactly what the extent is right now on Monday as I record this of Jacoby Brissett's injury. If Jacoby Brissett is going to be out, then Brian Hoyer is 0% owned, like 0.0% owned right now, right? He is available. If you need a quarterback to replace Brissett, or if you've been playing Minshew, or you have a quarterback on bye, whatever, Hoyer is going to be 100% available. He's got an extremely favorable matchup this week. And then you also have to imagine that he put up 15 points, over 15 points, fantasy points, in less than 3 quarters against a really, really good Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Like, the Steelers defense is legit, man. Like, that's by far the strength of the team. That's the thing that's keeping that team alive right now, right, is their defense. And he put up over 15 fantasy points in less than 3 quarters against them. Miami gives up over 25 fantasy points per game. Brian Hoyer is in line to put up over 20 points, I would say pretty much guaranteed, because if he puts up 15 in less than 3 quarters, let's just call it 3 quarters, and it was over 15, right, against the Steelers. So he's putting up over 5 points a quarter against the Steelers. He's going to easily put up over 5 points a quarter against the Dolphins, who give up more than that anyways. So Brian Hoyer is going to be a sneaky top 15, top 12 play next week if Brissett is injured, and he's 100% available, ladies and gentlemen. My number 2 streaming quarterback of the week is Jimmy GQ. Coming off of his swagger, hitting on Aaron Andrews' performance last week, you have to think that he just proved that he can have a big quarterback week. That was by far his biggest week of the year. The Seahawks are the 12th worst against fantasy quarterbacks this year. They give up over 20 points per game, and they're getting worse. The Seahawks defense, right? And then San Fran is undeniably a run-first offense. So when you're game planning to stop the Niners, you're game planning to stop the run. Emmanuel Sanders in town for San Francisco now has proven to be a big hit immediately. Jimmy is very comfortable with him. Some of the timing routes that they hit in that game on Thursday night were insanity, considering Emmanuel's only just been there for a couple of weeks. Emmanuel scored touchdowns in back-to-back games. Just gives Jimmy another high-level elite option outside of George Kittle to target. And with teams really focusing the run defense, Seattle being a terrible pass defense in general, I think Jimmy Garoppolo could go off again this week like he did this past week. It's not a guarantee or anything, but he's only 33.5% owned on ESPN.com, so you have a good chance of being able to go out there and get him. And I think he's the kind of guy that I would gamble on as a streamer this week. And my third and final option for streaming quarterbacks for Week 10 is probably a better option, probably the best option out of the three of these guys in a way, and that's Daniel Jones. I just feel like with Daniel Jones, he does have a pretty low ownership percentage currently on ESPN.com, 32.8%. So it's even less than Jimmy G. But obviously Jimmy G just played the Cardinals, so blah, blah, blah. Anyways, Daniel Jones, he's only owned in 32.8%, and he's got a phenomenal matchup coming up this week against the Jets. But I just feel like he's going to be everybody's top target in the waiver wire, which is why I put him down a little bit. If you're higher in your waiver priority in your league and you want to go after Daniel Jones, that's a good choice. You know, I think he's safer than Brian Hoyer because I don't know the extent of Jacoby Brissett's injury. You know, he might have a higher ceiling than Brian Hoyer as well. You know, he's safer than Jimmy Garoppolo as well, I would say. It's just that I feel like his ownership is going to be everybody's going to go after him. So, but anyways, he's playing the Jets, who just allowed the worst team in football, my favorite team in football, the Miami Dolphins, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Harvard man himself, to put up a QB6 performance. Ryan Fitzpatrick this past week against the Jets was the QB6. He put up over 23 fantasy points. You're telling me that Daniel Jones, with his rushing upside and with Saquon Barkley, and you're telling me that Daniel Jones doesn't have at least what Ryan Fitzpatrick just put up last week, 23 points. He doesn't have at least that in him against this horrible Jets D that's just hemorrhaging points. They've decimated their team, by trading away players, injuries. They're a terrible, terrible football team. Giants have weapons. Daniel Jones is a threat running the ball. He's a threat throwing the ball. Fitzpatrick just scorched this defense last week. I love Daniel Jones this week. If you have high waiver priority, he might be the top guy to target. Now, looking at tight end streaming options for Week 10, my number one option is Jacob Hollister. And the reason why he's my number one option is because he offers more than just a 1 week streaming potential. He offers season-long play upside. He's clearly the replacement for Will Disley. It's not Luke Wilson, guys. We all love Luke Wilson, especially as a Canadian. You love Luke Wilson, but he's not the replacement for Will Disley. The replacement is Jacob Hollister, and it's not a one-to-one replacement. Luke Wilson's going to take some of those. Chris Carson might catch some of those receptions out of the backfield. Some of those receptions might go to the slot receiver. It's not a one-to-one. He's not going to get 100% of what Will Disley's workload was, but he should, even if he can just see half of Will Disley's workload for the remainder of the year, then he is a top 12 tight end, and he's a guy that you could probably reliably start. Like, if you look at Will Disley's stat lines and just imagine half of that, imagine that in your lineup, you'd be like, yeah, all right, I'll take that. So Jacob Hollister offers season-long upside as well as streaming upside. So if I were you, I would target him first, put him in your lineup, and play him until the targets start to dissipate, or some kind of something happens that shows you that he's not the guy. Because for now, he seems like he might be a player that you can roll with consistently. And my second streaming option for tight ends in Week 10 is a pure streaming option. It's Cameron Brate. He's taking on the Arizona Cardinals, who are still horrible against tight ends in fantasy football, as they have been. And if OJ Howard is out, then Cameron Brate's going to see all of the potential receptions. It's not like Howard was getting a ton of targets, I'm sure, as you know. Anyways, but Jameis was always preferred to target Cameron Brate, and they're going to move the ball against this Cardinals team. They're going to have red zone opportunities. Jameis likes to target Cameron Brate in the red zone, and the Cardinals like to leave the tight end open in the red zone. I think Cameron Brate's upside of like his chance of catching a touchdown this week is extraordinarily high, particularly if OJ Howard's going to be out, which it appears that he is. So, I mean, Cameron Brate's the guy to play here. He's probably the guy to play in DFS. He's a perfect streaming option for the week. So if you need a 1 week streamer, he's 100% the guy you should go after. Now, as far as DST streamers go for the week, my number one DST streamer is the Kansas City Chiefs at the Tennessee Titans. Chiefs are only 13% owned, so you have an extremely high chance of being able to get them. And Mahomes is like pretty much a shoo-in to be back this week, right? And we saw with Matt Moore, the Chiefs were very competent offensively and played better defense when Matt Moore came around. So I expect that to be the same. I think the team got a little reinvigorated when Mahomes went down, kind of like how the Saints felt like the entire team stepped up their play when Drew Brees was down there. I feel like the Chiefs have done that over the last 2 weeks, going 1-1 against the Packers, who they went to the brink with, and then the Vikings, who they beat, two of the best teams in the NFC. They just took, to the edge, right? And beat the Vikings. So with Mahomes back, this team, I think they're going to pop off, even against a Titans team who has a really good defense, and they're a quality team for sure. I think with Mahomes back this week, they're going to pop off, man. They're going to score big. They're going to score often. And the Titans are going to have to try to keep pace. And Tannehill has been really good. I love Tannehill. As a Dolphins fan, I've always liked him, And he's been very competent, and he's been good this year since he's started playing. But he's not a quarterback. He's a guy that if you put him in a bad situation and you ask him to throw the ball a ton, he can make some mistakes. And I just think that this is going to be a big turnover game for Tannehill and the Titans in general. They're going to give up some sacks. I think there's just a lot of defensive points to be had for the Chiefs in this one. Even though the Chiefs isn't the best defense, their offense is going to score so much that Tennessee's going to have to try to keep pace. And I think that it's just going to be a bad day for Ryan Tannehill. Trust me, as a Dolphins fan, I've seen a few bad performances from Tannehill, and I think I know when they're coming, and I think that one's coming this week. And my second and final streaming option for DST's Fantasy Football Week 10 is the Cleveland Browns versus the Buffalo Bills. Now, I think that, Josh Allen's a good quarterback, and he provides a lot of flair and upside for his team. And I think the Buffalo Bills will likely win this game. But Josh Allen's interception rate is the 8th worst in the NFL this year. He has 7 interceptions. He has 10 fumbles. He's been sacked 21 times, all through 9 games. The Browns have 25 sacks this year. They're 8th best in the NFL. So, Josh Allen in the Bills give up a lot of sacks. The Browns get a lot of sacks. Josh Allen the Browns defense doesn't get a lot of turnovers. They're not known for getting a ton of turnovers, but Josh Allen is known for giving up a lot of turnovers. So I think that this is just going to be a low-scoring game. I would also say the Bills defense is very playable, but the Browns defense is 30.4% owned. The Bills defense is much more than that. I don't want to give anything that's even over 40% owned. At that point, if you're in a competitive league, that defense is owned, right? Or any kind of a deep league, right? So 30.4% owned Browns defense, a little bit more owned than the Chiefs defense, which is why I gave the Chiefs first. But the Browns, they're sure to get a couple of turnovers. Josh Allen's always good for a couple of turnovers. They're good to get a bunch of sacks because that defense gets sacks and Josh Allen gives up sacks. A couple of sacks, couple turnovers. That's going to be some decent production for a defense, especially a good streaming option. So that makes the Browns a really quality option for here in Week 10. All right, folks, so that does it for this episode of Joel Empey Talks NFL, and I want to thank you for watching this video. If you did enjoy the video, please like it. I really appreciate that a lot. Subscribe to the channel. That helps me out a ton when you give me this subscription clicks. Comment below anything you want to comment about Week 10 in the NFL or anything I said during this video. please follow me on Twitter at MPTalks. That'll be in the description box below, and you can see the horrible, janky graphic right there as well. And until next time, cheers, friends.